Welcome to the sixth and final part of my series on Miles Mathis's research article titled "The Tate Murders Were a False Flag in the Greatest Unknown Success Story of Project Chaos." Let's continue where we left off in part 5. In closing, let's bookend this investigation by looking at Manson one last time. We have seen that Sharon Tate wasn't where we thought she was for the past 40 years. Has Manson been where we thought he was? Here is a recent picture of Manson. The date is right there for you. Do you see a problem? Prisons don't allow beards like that. Beards used to have to be trimmed to half an inch, but since 1998, they have been disallowed in California state prisons. Manson was originally at Vegaville and San Quentin, but he was transferred to Corcoran in 1989, a California state prison. So the question we should have is Manson really in prison at all? Or do they just ask him to come in every couple of years so they can take his picture with a printed card? Ask yourself this: do we have any evidence that wouldn't be easy to fake, that Manson is really living at Corcoran? If they can fake all these deaths, they can fake a few people being in prison. If you don't think so, I encourage you to study John Hinckley, who allegedly shot Reagan in 1981. You can find out the truth there without doing much research. Mainstream sources admit that Hinckley, the son of a rich friend of the Bushes, never went to jail, was being released into the care of his mother within a few years, and that during the last decade he has spent almost as much time at home as in the cushy psychiatric hospital. Since 2009, he has been given a dozen home visits of 10 days at a time. Do the math and you find that is 1/3 of the year. He is also allowed to drive. Most people assume Hinckley is serving a life term, and they have always been wrong. Most people assume Manson is serving a life term. Are they right? We don't know. They make little movies about Manson every few years and release some pictures, but as we have seen, those things can be faked as easily as a 15-second commercial for Rice-A-Roni. Manson could be living in Big Sur in a house on the beach for all we know. There is another obvious problem here. Do you see it? Compare the 1971 to the 2009 photo. Manson has had an ear tuck on his right ear. Do you really think the state of California paid for or allowed an ear tuck? State prisons pay for necessary health care, but not for elective cosmetic surgery. How many interviews has Manson done since 1970? 20? 30? More? Don't you think it is odd that Manson has appeared with Newell Emmons, Charlie Rose, Tom Snyder, Diane Sawyer, Geraldo, Ron Reagan Jr., Penny Daniels, Heidi Schulman, Michael Ben Horn, and many others? I encourage you to listen to all of them closely. For a start, go to the very first one, his 1972 interview on San Quentin death row, which is ridiculous from the first frame. First we see Manson getting his dinner. Manson refuses his dinner and asks the server to give his steak to Mike next door. So they serve steak every night at San Quentin, I guess, and prisoners can request their meals be given to other prisoners? They expect us to believe this? Then, when the interview starts, the interviewer just sticks his microphone up to the bars. Do you really think journalists and camera crews are allowed to interview and film death row inmates inside the cell block? Of course not, which is why in future interviews they decided to bring Manson into an interview room of some sort and make it look slightly more believable. The last thing Manson says in that first interview is, quote, "I believe what I'm told to believe, don't you?" End quote. They were messing with us even then. They don't feel compelled to make these interviews believable, since they just assume the audience knows nothing about nothing. But they are quite willing to insert their own private jokes. As they are brainwashing you, they laugh and ask you if you enjoy being brainwashed. Even after they moved the interview and camera crew into a private room in later films, the thing was still a farce. since level 1 prisoners like Manson are not allowed to talk to anyone except their attorneys, clergy, or law enforcement. This is the common rule in all state prisons across the country and has been for decades. Anytime you see an interview with a convicted mass murderer/torturer, you should ask how such an interview is possible. I encourage you to watch again the 1988 Geraldo interview with Manson. It starts out with a pan of the room, and we see the film crew strolling around. One bored cop is by the door, not even looking towards Manson. Everyone, including Geraldo, appears to be suppressing a smile. Manson is wearing blue jeans and a brown shirt and is sporting a longish beard with long hair. I paused there at 16 seconds into an hour-long interview, and I already knew it was fake. This is Charles Manson, folks. Supposedly one of the most dangerous men alive. This is the guy who lunged over the court tables and supposedly tried to get at his judge with a sharp pencil. But here he is with Geraldo, and Manson has no handcuffs on. No security is near him. He is not wearing prison clothes. He is not shaved or shorn like a prisoner. And he is acting like he is in control of the script, which he may have been. He is ordering the cameramen around. They simply do not let level 1 prisoners do interviews like this. If Manson were who we have been told he is, he could kill Geraldo with one punch to the throat or one jerk of his chin. Instead, we see Geraldo leaning in, his head less than a foot away from Manson. They are literally knee to knee. No table is between them. We see Geraldo covering a chuckle at second 26. Anyone who thinks this is a real interview with a mass murderer has done too many acid trips themselves. The 1989 Penny Daniels interview is also a flying farce, since Manson comes in wearing a wide-collar hippie shirt, dark sunglasses, Converse sneakers, and a beard that is at least 3 inches long. He's also still wearing his leather thong necklace. None of that is regulation prison attire. You may want to check Penny Daniels' bio and Wikipedia page. Although this is by far the biggest thing she ever did, it isn't even mentioned. Manson walks into the interview room thinking he has an interview with someone from France. He is like a movie star at cons who can't keep up with all his worldwide interviews. He should travel with a booking agent. He then tells the prison administrator, who is present, to sit down and shut up. He tells him he is just a lockman and that he doesn't have any power there. Very amusing theater, but no more than that. Outrageously unbelievable in every way. You should notice that Manson's face and hands show no indication of the third-degree burns he was supposed to have suffered at Vacaville in 1984, when he was allegedly doused in paint thinner and set on fire. Third-degree burns require excision and always scar badly, but we see nothing like that. You will say the scars are beneath the beard, but beards don't grow over third-degree burned skin, especially not thick, healthy beards like we see on Manson. Also see 8 minutes 40 seconds in, where we see Manson's right hand very clearly. Doesn't look like a jail hand, since it is clean and well manicured. Also, no scarring. Also, a gold pinky ring? Not allowed in jail. At 22 minutes and 30 seconds, we see the left hand as well. No scarring, as smooth as a girl's hand. Manson does give away some information though. He tells us he knew Lynette Fromm from before 1967. He tries to cover by saying he knew her in a dream, but he is obviously rattled for a moment, realizing he has said something he shouldn't have. According to the standard story, he wasn't supposed to meet Fromm until 1967, after he had been out of prison some months. This implies that Manson's earlier prison record may be faked or padded as well. Knowing what we now know, that doesn't take much believing. I also encourage you to listen closely to Manson's Sneakyville speech, reproduced several times on YouTube.
Horrors airing their ideologies.
We are sneaking in the county jail, looking under the door to see if the man is there. Sneaking like little children out of town. Sneaking all around the courthouse. Sneaking in and out of the ventilators, sneaking everywhere. Everything is sneaky up around Sneakyville. Everything we have to do is to get to the truth has to be sneaky. It seems a shame to sneak to get to the truth, to make the truth such an evil, dirty, old, nasty thing. You gotta sneak to get to the truth. The truth is condemned. The truth is in the gas chamber. The truth has been in your stockyards, your slaughterhouses. The truth has been in your reservations, building your railroads, emptying your garbage. The truth is in your ghettos, in your jails, in your young love, not in your courts or your Congress, where the old sit judgment on the young. What the hell do the old know about the young? They put a picture of old George on the dollar and tell you that he's your father, worship him. Look at the madness that goes on. You can't prove anything that happened yesterday. Now is the only thing that's real. You can try to prove that Columbus sailed on an ocean, but it's not the same ocean. It's a different ocean. It's a different world. Every day, every reality is a new reality. Every new reality is a new horizon, a brand new experience of living. I got a note last night from a friend of mine. He writes in this note that he's afraid of what he might have to do in order to save his reality, as I saved mine. You can't prove anything. There's nothing to prove. Every man judges himself. He knows what he is. You know what you are as I know what I am. We all know what we are. Nobody can stand in judgment. They can play like they're standing in judgment. They can play like they stand in judgment and take you off and control the masses with your human body. And they can lock you up in penitentiaries and cages and put you on crosses as they did in the past. But it doesn't amount to anything. What they're doing is they're only persecuting a reflection of themselves. They're persecuting what they can't stand to look at in themselves. The truth. They can't stand to look at the truth in themselves. They persecute themselves. They're butchering themselves every time they go on the freeway. They hate themselves. Look at the signs. Stop. Go. Turn here. Turn there. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't. This is illegal. That's illegal. Everything's illegal. The police used to watch over the people. Now they're watching the people. The president doesn't represent the people. He should be on the roadside picking up his children, but he isn't. He's in the White House sending them off to war. And you're saying I have to pay for this again? And again and again, I've got to pay for your sins. How many times have I got to pay for your sins? I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired. The people you call my family were people that you didn't want, children that were alongside the road that their parents had kicked out. So I took them to my garbage dump and fed them and taught them that in love there's no wrong. Everything they've done for love of brother.
I lived with Charlie for 1 year.
Do you hear a problem? Although the audio is pretty well synced to the video, that isn't Manson's voice. It sounds more like Henry Fonda or Peter Coyote. I don't know why they would replace the audio, since Manson is very able to do his own audio. Maybe they lost the audio. The Newell Emmons back porch interview in 1979 is also ridiculous. First, we have to ask, who in the hell is Newell Emmons? Have you ever heard of anyone named Newell? I found 2 other names of Newell on the internet, but they both looked fake as well. Newell Emmons is another phantom with no history other than his work with Manson. We have these interviews and a book in 1986, and other than that, Newell Emmons didn't exist. It looks like an anagram to me. I would say it is meant to be an anagram of Emmanuelson, which is both a lengthening of Manson and a reminder that Manson claims to be the Son of God. Emmanuel, Son. Newell Emmons isn't a real person. It is just an alter ego of Manson. We see more theater in the later 1992 interview with Michael Ben Horan, by which time they have lost any last sliver of respect for the whole charade. They dress the young female interviewer like Victoria, and expect you to believe her real name is Ben Horan, as if she is Jewish or something. It is all an inside joke and not even a subtle one. It was a toss-up whether to name her Michael Ben Horan or Michael Ben Dover. Do a web search and you will see she has no presence before or after 1992. We are to believe she has done nothing except that one interview 20 years ago? We do, however, get the continuation of the joke with another Michael Ben Horan, who is a more recent terrorist praying for the death of Ariel Sharon. Get it? Ariel Sharon? Sharon Tate. And see how this Michael Ben Horan is given his own Charlie Manson beard to go with his death camp shirt and star. Hilarious, right? For more of the same kind of jokes, you can research John Ace Nihil, which is the fake name of a fake director who supposedly produced the fake Manson family movies in 1984. These are fake home movies made to look like the Manson family shot the movies of themselves. They even made up reviews. One of them is, "Looks like the real thing, signed Kenneth Anger." To get that joke, though, you have to know who Kenneth Anger is. Anger is a fake Crowley Satanist who made a lot of propaganda movies on the occult, homosexuality, and surrealism back in the 50s and 60s. But to understand what he was really up to, you simply have to look at the date of his first film, Fireworks, which came out in 1947. Remember that date? That is year one of the CIA. Whenever you see Crowley or Satanism, you can substitute CIA or MI6 instead. Anger was one of the top guys at Lookout Mountain from the beginning, producing their raciest propaganda. So for Anger to be quoted as saying, "looks like the real thing," is doubly and triply rich. They might as well have two thumbs up from Goebbels and Riefenstahl. Looks like first-rate agitprop to us. Somehow, this fake person, Ace Nihil, was also able to get a series of interviews with Manson between 1972 and 1979, which, like everything else, you can see on YouTube. This, despite the fact that we know he wasn't allowed visitors. In a 1975 telephone interview with Sandra Good, both Good and the reporter admit that Manson was not allowed visitors, much less interviews with filmmakers. Nihil is the Latin word for nothing, and Ace is a Latin word for grass, as in the phrase Ais alunum, another person's money. So Ace Nihil translates as money for nothing, as in the Dire Straits song from 1985. Ais Nihil probably is Kenneth Anger, but if he isn't, he is just another director at the still busy Lookout Mountain Film Laboratory, aka Hollywood. Now maybe you can understand why the people running these events decided to go ahead with 9/11 and everything since. By the late 1990s, they could see that no matter how outrageous their stunts and jokes became, no one was catching on. Even the most revolutionary conspiracy theorists were clueless, missing everything. No one had even come close to figuring anything out, even though the perpetrators were leaving clues everywhere in plain sight, bigger every year. When people are so stupid they don't even know you are manipulating them, it isn't fun anymore. It isn't fun being a bad guy when no one even knows how bad you are. That is why they graduated to 9/11 and Sandy Hook and everything in between. They need to be noticed. They need to be appreciated as bad guys. Just as I need my audience and you need yours, they need their audience. They need someone to get the jokes. Just as Moriarty needed Sherlock Holmes, these people need me. Even if I don't fully appreciate their sick jokes, at least I get them. I don't have to like them or even respect them, but it is important that I see them. No one likes to be fully invisible. Even the spooks don't like to be fully invisible. They like to get away with everything, but it is much preferable to be visible while you are getting away with it. Don't you see? Any fool can get away with an invisible crime. It takes someone really clever to get away with a visible crime. Or this is the way they think. The latest Manson psyop was in 2011, when Vanity Fair Spain did a radio interview with him. This picture ran with the story. That's supposed to be Manson with Starr and Grey Wolf, two secretaries who help him publish his ideas through ATWA, which stands for Air, Trees, Water, Animals. We are told he plans to marry the 25-year-old Starr. They never quit. They respect your intelligence so little they continue the farce to this day. Level 1 prisoners are not allowed visits from strangers like this. They also aren't allowed radio interviews with Vanity Fair. If Manson were a real prisoner, he would be allowed to talk to his attorney, his immediate real family by blood or previous marriage, or law enforcement. He is not allowed to pose for pictures with CIA agents posing as hippies. He is not allowed a beard. He is not allowed to wear a kerchief around his neck. He is not allowed 2 rings on his left hand. He is not allowed to take a wife. And even if he were, he would be allowed to talk to her only through plexiglass. He would not be allowed conjugal visits even from an original wife, and especially not from a new wife. And the whole ATWA website is just one more pathetic attempt to slander the environmental movement. Starr looks like Susan Atkins 40 years ago, and now that Atkins is supposedly dead, they needed a replacement. Crazy girl actress of the hour, hired from SAG. Update December 2014. They are going ahead with this wedding charade, although it wouldn't do Manson any good even if all this were real. He wouldn't get conjugal visits, so what's the point? Anyway, the Los Angeles Times has now printed the marriage license, giving us the latest clue. Apparently, they're telling us Manson is living in Santa Barbara. It is his fiancée, Afton, that lives in Corcoran, according to the certificate. You will tell me they just accidentally switched them. Maybe, but I take it as their latest tipping of their hand to us. If you live in Santa Barbara, keep your eyes open. That guy you just thought looked like Charlie may actually be him. This last bit of info leads us to ask who Charles Manson really was. If he wasn't the crazy ex-con we have been sold, who was he? Well, we saw above that Sharon Tate's dad was a colonel in military intelligence. Turns out, Charles Manson's real father was also a colonel, Colonel Walker Scott. He had worked for the Baltimore and Ohio Railway and was a member of the Elks Lodge. Manson's paternal grandmother's name was Gladys Cline. Scott allegedly died at age 44 in Ashland, Kentucky. The B&O Railway was at the time merged with the C&O Railway under the control of Cyrus Eaton. Eaton was a protege of John D. Rockefeller. He has also likely had intelligence connections, which we can see from his foundation of the Pugwash Conferences in 1957. These conferences on sciences and world affairs were put together after the Russell-Einstein Manifesto of 1955, both of which sought solutions to global security threats, including nuclear threats. In other words, it was all another propaganda project. The Elks are a Masonic-type lodge, probably allied to the Freemasons. The only difference is they can have alcohol on premises. The Elks were started right after the Civil War, and I assume they are an intelligence front. The name Gladys Cline is almost certainly Jewish, and we can tell that by the first name as well as the last. You may be interested to know that Elvis's mother was named Gladys as well, and that she was also Jewish. See the Star of David on her original tombstone. Kevin Kline is Jewish on his father's side. Ashland, Kentucky is the home of 2 military bases. Manson's half-brother Walker Scott Jr. was also a colonel stationed at Sampson Air Force Base in New York. Manson also had an aunt from his family, Mrs. May Cooksey, who lived in Long Beach, California. She was married to Corporal Alton Burt Cooksey, who is also buried in Ashland, so we have to ask what they were doing in Long Beach. Well, the port of Long Beach is one of the world's largest shipping ports, with a Navy presence as well. So Burt Cooksey was probably a technician there. This would have made him a Marine corporal, which connected him to the Navy, which may have connected him to J. Sebring and Colonel Paul Tate. If that is true, that would give us only 2 degrees of separation between Manson, Tate, and Sebring. But regardless, we have seen that Manson's father and half-brother were both colonels, which is strange enough in itself. Also strange is that they never tell you that in the mainstream bios. Before we leave Manson, I draw your attention to a final anomaly on the marriage license above. Note that his birthday is listed as 11/11/34. That is curious for 2 reasons. 1. 1111 is a favorite number of Intel. They use it as a signal or as numerology in their events, along with 33 and 88. 2. The date is curious because it is wrong. The date listed on his mainstream bio is 11/12/34. Addendum, July 30th, 2017. I have said a couple of times above that Manson may have been a guy they pulled from jail with some acting skills. But as I got further into the paper, we could both see that wasn't the case. The section above shows he was not in jail after the event, so he was probably not in jail before it either. He was an actor all along, so his early bio appears to be a complete fake. In the years after writing this paper, I have done a lot of genealogy work on famous people of all kinds, showing that most of them come from the upper reaches of the British peerage. As it turns out, the same applies to Manson. They didn't even bother to change his name, assuming he wouldn't be able to do the fairly simple research tying him to nobility. All we have to do is go to thepeerage.com and search on the names Manson and Mills. Mills is his middle name, remember? It is actually the name Mills that got me into this, since I tripped over it in the peerage while doing research on other people. There are 37 people in the peerage with the surname Mills, including the 2nd Earl Saunders. He fought in the Boer War in the 33rd Company. His mother was a Stracey, daughter of the 5th Baronet, and his grandmother was Diana Scott. Remember, a Colonel Scott was Charles Manson's father. Diana Scott also married a Baronet, Stracey, and his mother was a Latham. See my paper on F. Scott Fitzgerald. These people were also related to the Clarks, the Gores, the Lees, the Pitts, Brad Pitt, the Bridges, Jeff Bridges, and the Baronets, Hawkins. The Lees were the Earls of Lichfield, which linked them to King Charles II. They were also related to the Capels, Earls of Essex, and through them to the Russells, Dukes of Bedford. They were also related to the Barons Betnick, and through them to the Seymours, Charltons, Hughes, and Liddells. This probably links us to Charlton Heston. The Liddells were Earls of Ravensworth at this time, linking us again to the Seymours and also to the Hamiltons. Also related to the Simpsons, Bowes Lyons, Middletons, and Morgans. Through the Betnicks, we are linked to the Rathborns, the Winchesters, the De Veres, the Beauclerks, and the Johnstones, Baronets of Westerhall. Also to the Murrays, Lords of Elibank, think Bill Murray. Also to the Pierres, and through them the McVeighs, think Timothy McVeigh. The Johnsons linked us to the Berkeleys, Kings, Parsons, Hicks, Fitzgeralds, Moores, Sheridans, Morrisons, and Gordons. The Straceys link us to the Steenburgens, Mary Steenburgen, the Greys, the Knowles, the Bloomfields, the Vaughans, the Peggetts, the Villiers, the Rollos, the Hills, the Balfours, the Bennetts, the Bartletts, the Robinsons, Earls of Ripon, the Eggers, the Careys, Jim Carey, the Herberts, the Lindsays, the Woods, the Stewarts, the Shepherds, the Drummonds, the Hindenburgs, the Bacons, Kevin Bacon, the Hawks, Ethan Hawke, and the Harleys. Through the Harleys, we linked to Jane Elizabeth Scott, wife of Lord Byron, giving us a second prominent link to the surname Scott. I was looking for a Tate, or other name from the Manson event, but didn't find it with the Mills. But I bet you can. In fact, I only had to go to one more Mills in the peerage, Major General Thomas Porter Mills, to find the Tate we were looking for. This Mills married a Glascott, daughter of a Bourke. One of these Bourkes was married to a Rice, who married a Kindersley. Michael Kindersley Belmont married Virginia Ann Tate, daughter of George Vernon Tate and Evelyn Chandler in 1953. George Vernon Tate was the son of George Booth Tate, which also links us back to John Wilkes Booth. These are the Baronets Tate who funded the Tate Galleries London. I hadn't previously made that link. Any link to Paul Tate has of course been scrubbed, but my guess is he is related to these Tates. At any rate, I have found a short link between the Tates and the Mills in the peerage, which is unlikely to be a coincidence. Let us see if we can back that up with other links. In fact, we find a lot of supporting evidence in Paul Tate's own genealogy at Wikitree. His grandmother is given a Della Florence Latham. We just found a Latham closely related to Mills, Earl Saunders above. We also find Lees on both sides of Paul Tate's tree, just a couple of generations back. We also saw Lees closely related to the Mills and Scotts above. The mainstream bios admit these ancestors of Paul Tate go back to the Dandridges of Virginia, which of course links Tate to George Washington. Paul Tate's mother was a Cleveland, which may link him to Grover Cleveland. Tate's recent genealogy also contains many other presidential names, including Monroe and Madison. Another thing I just noticed at Genie.com, Sharon Tate has a half-sister. I found nothing on a search for that. But let's go back to the peerage and look at the name Manson. As a teaser, I remind you that Charles Lindbergh's real surname was Manson. His grandfather changed it when he came over from Sweden. So Lindy's real ancestral name was Charles Manson. There are 51 Mansons in the peerage, which we see are related to Forbes, Spencer, and Palmer, before even taking the first link. The first one I choose to click on is of course Dr. Charles Manson. He is too recent to do us any real good, since his granddaughter was born in 2007. That would give him a birth date around the time of the Tate-Manson hoax, which means it is possible he is a son of Charles Mills Manson, although I found no strong evidence for or against that. These Mansons are scrubbed, but Dr. Charles Manson's son, Emond, married Lara Dawn, Anstruther Go Calthorpe, daughter of Neil Hamilton Anstruther Gow Calthrop, and Martha Rodman Dawn. Note the name Hamilton, which we saw above in the Mills lines. Lara's stepfather is the second Baronet Nicholson, and his mother is a Murray of the Viscounts Elibank. Also note the Murrays of Elibank, since they are in the Mills lines as well. Murray's mother was Blanche Scott, born 1845, which gives us a third link to that surname in Charles Mills Manson's father. These Scotts in the peerage are closely related to the Clarks and Daniels. The Murrays are also related to the Montgomerys and the Fitzroys. The Anstruther Go Calthorpes are closely related to the Hubbards, Fitzallans, and Howards. The Anstruthers were the Baronets Balkowski, who were related to the Pattons, the Hussies, the Windsors, and the Herberts, and so on. The second Manson I click on is Baroness Manson, born 1932. She is the daughter of Solomon Manson and Fannie Taylor, and she married Kevin Gould. That is a good start, because we can already tell these people are Jewish. Gould is scrubbed, but that is a Jewish name. In support of that, we find that Solomon Manson's mother was Rebecca Steinberg. Fannie Taylor is also unlinked, but we may assume she is related to the Taylors we have researched before, including Liz Taylor and Keanu Reeves' mother. They are related to the peerage and are also crypto-Jews. No other information or links are available for this Baroness Manson, but it is not clear why she was elevated to the peerage. Next, we click on William Alastair Leslie Manson, who married a Waddington, daughter of Elspeth Grant, who was the daughter of Colonel Grant, 10th Baronet of Moneymusk, and Evelyn Lindsay Wood. Already, we have 2 hits, since we just saw above the Mills Earls related to both Lindsays and Woods. This indicates Charles Mills Manson's names are not an accident. These Mansons were related to the Douglases through the Grants, and the Douglases are way up in the peerage. They are also related to the Costers. Kevin Costner? The Grants are related to the Hamiltons and Clarks, giving us 2 more links to the Mills Earls. It is through these Grants that they are related to the Forbes. This Evelyn Lindsay Wood was the granddaughter of Charlotte Rich, of the Rich baronets and admirals, and they in turn were descended from the Willises, think Bruce Willis, Walters, and Grays. Through the Woods, we link to the Mainwarings and Barretts. Next, we click on Christopher Spencer Manson, son of Juan Lewin, grandson of Violet Hughes Morgan. The names Hughes and Morgan again links us to the Mills Earls above. The Morgans link us to the Morgans of Wales and to J.P. Morgan. The Lewins also link us to the Holford Walkers. The Lewins are obviously Jewish, short for Lewinsky. Next, we click on Forbes Manson, husband of Jane Johnston. Her father was Sir William Bacon Johnson, 8th Baronet of Caspian. His mother was Maria Bacon. This links us to the Mills Earls 2 more times, through the names Johnston and Bacon. That makes 11 hits already. You need more? There are more. We click on Elizabeth Rose Manson, who married Captain Gordon in 1856. Her father was Lieutenant General William Gordon. We saw Gordons above in the Mills line. One of them married a Scot. That makes 12 hits. Are you really going to be arguing that all 12 hits are coincidental? For Lucky 13, we can click on Sidney Manson, who married William Sinclair, daughter of Elizabeth Murray. They were related to the Dunbars and Frasers. We saw the Murrays above. For 14, I give you Louisa Manson, who married Lieutenant Colonel Cumberland. His brother, Major General Cumberland, married Elizabeth King, daughter of William Moss King. This General Cumberland also married a McRoberts, whose father was John Pomeroy McRoberts. For more on the Pomeroys, see my later paper on John Reed. Let's go for 15. David Manson married Phyllis Ward in 1925. Her grandmother was Alicia Palmer, and Alicia's son was Major George Stewart Ward. The Wards were related to the Crosbys and Hamiltons, which actually gives us 16. Through the Hamiltons, we link to the Howards. Mary Ann Manson married Major Cochrane, son of the 9th Earl of Dundonald. This links us to the Stuarts of Torrance, which links us to the Murrays again. The Stuarts, the Bruces, the Barnes, the Husseys, the Hepburns, the Flemings, the Keiths, the Montgomerys, the Hamiltons, again, and the Reeds. So, we have proof that the Mansons and Millises are closely related in the peerage. There is no way Charles Mills Manson's name can be an accident. I've also shown you how Charles Manson may be related to so many of his fellow actors in Hollywood. To see more indication of that, we can go to Charlie's own genealogy, where we find the names Ingram, Lowe, Holbrook, Maynard, Jackson, Holt, Frazier, Hamilton, and Greenstreet. To start with, we saw the names Hamilton and Fraser above. Fraser is a variant of Frazier. In my last paper on Ben Franklin, we saw the Holts were closely related to the Hamiltons in the peerage. The Holts were the baronets of Manchester, related to the Stuarts. Also related to the De Veres, the Fawcetts, Farrah Fawcett, the Palmers, the Potters, the Hayworths, Rita Hayworth, and Graves, Peter Graves, the Durnings, Charles Durning, the Pierponts, and the Pelham Clintons, Dukes of Newcastle under Lynn. Also see the Clintons, Earls of Lincoln. Most of these families were from the Liverpool area. Through the name Holbrook, Charlie may be related to Hal Holbrook. Through the name Lowe, he may be related to Rob Lowe and John Forbes Carey. See my recent paper on Marx's wife for more on that. He may also be related to Sidney Greenstreet. Charlie's grandmother was an Ingram, and that is another important name from the peerage, with around 300 name holders. See the baronets of Swineshead Abbey. Also related to the same families, including the Palmers, the Keith Falconers, the Turners, the Hamiltons, the Spencers, the Murrays, the Wards, the Herberts, and the Middletons. More recently, 1963, an Ingram in the peerage married a Pesnik. See Steve Pesnik, born in Cuba to Russian Jewish parents, now a military spy novelist. Formerly, he had high positions in the U.S. State Department. Currently, one of his projects is, in my opinion, infiltrating the truth movement. He has appeared on Alex Jones pretending to be a truther. For this reason, it looks like they partially scrubbed Charlie's genealogy, but not very well. As usual, of those people they left in, they didn't change the names. They only changed the places and bios, making it look like they were regular folks or poor folks instead of these people of recent nobility. Now let us move on to Susan Atkins. The videos of Atkins are equally suspicious and absurd. I encourage you to watch her last words in this video from ABC News. Ask yourself this: is it common procedure to roll lifers into prison offices so that they can recite the Lord's Prayer for ABC News? Or does this maybe look a little bit like the continuation of a scripted tragedy, the final act in a long drawn-out and poorly written play? If that doesn't convince you, how about the picture above, which is a glamour shot of Atkins? She looks to be at least 35. Problem is, she was supposed to be in jail by the time she was 21. Do you think they do glamour shots for lifers? Look at her hands! They don't do fingernail polish in prison, and fingernails are not allowed to be long for obvious reasons. Nice wig, no? Do you really think they do wigs in prison? Yes, I suppose to encourage prisoners to go incognito so that they can escape. Which brings up the fact that Atkins, like Tex Watson, worked in a wig shop around the time she met Charlie. The CIA should have spread the jobs around better. Having Sebring set up both Watson and Atkins in both wig shop looks mighty suspicious after the fact, especially now that we know Paul Tate opened a hair salon in 1971. The red flags in the long Susan Atkins saga are legion, but just remember that Joseph Ball worked with Atkins after her arrest in 1969. Who is Joseph Ball? He was senior counsel on the Warren Commission, for one thing. Why was he giving counsel to Atkins, and who was paying for it? Atkins also skated charges several times like Manson. Although she pleaded guilty, her arrest for pot in 1968 led only to probation. Patricia Krenwinkel beat the same rap in Mendocino. Looks like they were being saved for their roles, like Tex Watson, who we will look at below, and Leslie Van Houten, who was a homecoming queen. Susan Adkins was a model high school student, having been the captain of her swim team and a singer in the church choir. That was only 1 year before she became Charlie's girl, and 2 years before she was supposed to turn into a witch, a torturer, and a multiple murderer. She was not the sort to drop out of high school to become a topless dancer, and she didn't. She was recruited to play a part. Strange that we never hear from Adkins's high school friends. They might tell you who she was recruited by and exactly under what circumstances. For another red flag, go to 40 minutes and 10 seconds in this video. Adkins and her attorney are being interviewed by reporters while still sitting at the courtroom table. She doesn't say much, but that isn't the point. She wouldn't be allowed to be interviewed at all, but especially not in the courtroom. No judge would allow reporters into his courtroom to interview an accused murderer, and no attorney would allow his client to talk to reporters in such a situation. The whole thing is staged. For more of this, I encourage you to watch her 1976 prison interview, which is at least as fishy as any Manson interview. Watch it again, knowing what you know now. Notice that in the beginning, she is just strolling through the prison grounds with the reporter. No handcuffs, no guards, no prison uniform. She is wearing a skirt, which is not provided or allowed in prison. She is wearing a large metal crucifix, which is also not allowed since it could be used as a weapon. This is supposed to be a vicious killer, one who could rip your eyes out at any moment. Also remember that level 1 prisoners like Adkins are only allowed contact with their attorneys, clergy, and law enforcement, not reporters. Once they sit down, we can see that she has long, painted fingernails, a gold ring, and a gold watch. Again, none of that is allowed. She then repeats the goriest part of the story, even adding new details. Why would she need to do that unless she was being paid to do it? By 1976, we had already heard the story millions of times from her and everyone else. Why interview her to get that again, unless you wanted to be sure it was indelibly etched into everyone's minds? If she was hoping to get out on parole, why would she keep repeating that she and Tex were there to do the devil's business and things like that? She seems more interested in keeping up the sensationalism than in benefiting her parole. You will say that she is stupid and or crazy, but I think we know now that she was doing the interview on orders from above. Not orders from Charlie, but orders from the CIA. Remember, the Tate LaBianca murders were solved only through the big mouth of Adkins, who blabbed to a cellmate in prison. According to testimony, Adkins was dancing and singing in the LA County Jail, refusing to wear underwear, doing cartwheels, and performing general theatrics, although she had already been charged for the murder of Gary Hinman. She wasn't acting crazy, since they send crazy people to the mental hospital. No, she was acting protected, and simply acting. Her relationship with cellmate Virginia Graham is peculiar from the first word, since Graham is said to have gotten her a job as a message runner in jail. We don't know why they need message runners in jail, why they would use accused murderers to be runners, or why Graham was in any position to recommend runners. It looks very much like Graham was planted to hear what Adkins was being paid to say, since it was time to get the police on the right track. It was time to move the story to the next chapter. Another red flag is Adkins' husband, James Whitehouse, 15 years younger than Adkins and a graduate of Harvard Law School, like Obama. He was married to her for 22 years, from 1987 on. Whitehouse may have the distinction of being the only guy in history to marry a female mass murderer in jail. If you check the website's listing, people who marry convicted murderers, you will find all the others are women who marry men in jail, not the reverse. And the women who marry male murderers are never law school graduates, as you might imagine. This marriage makes no sense on any level. It is a strong pointer to the fact that Atkins was always no more than an actor and was never really in jail. For more evidence of this, I recommend you watch the tapes of the trials, her own and Manson's. The things she said to the judge are pure theater and have never been repeated before or since in court and never shall be. All the girls acted absolutely crazy at all times. This has been spun by everyone to indicate they were crazy. Why did no one ask if they were acting? All the people murdered at the Tate house were actors, so why not ask if the people at the Spawn's movie ranch were also actors? They give you the clue right in the title. Here's another big clue everyone has missed regarding Susan Atkins. On September 5th, 1970, Chief Prosecutor Aaron Stovitz was pulled off the Manson case by District Attorney Evil Younger for a remark he made to the press. Stovitz was co-prosecutor with Bugliosi at the time. Younger claimed Stovitz had violated the no-comment policy, but since it was for the one-line off-the-cuff comment, no one could understand the overreaction by Younger. The comment in reference to Susan Atkins was, "She's better than Sarah Bernhardt." Of course, to get the joke, you have to know who Sarah Bernhardt was, and most people didn't. In Hollywood, they knew who she was. She was considered at the time to be the greatest actress ever. And so you see how this comment may have been seen as a little too revelatory by those running the show. The chief prosecutor was admitting that Susan Atkins was an actor. Before we get to Watson, let's take a quick look at Leslie Van Houten. In this video, at 46 minutes and 30 seconds of Van Houten talking about going from bad to good. It is 1982, long after her incarceration, but she is in some sort of classroom. She is wearing a short skirt and a tank top with bare arms and shoulders. A woman behind her is wearing an orange sleeveless dress, sunglasses, and a bandana. There are at least two young guys sitting behind her, both with longish hair. They are all sitting at school desks. Here's the question you should have. Where are these people supposed to be? It isn't prison. Van Houten was supposed to be in a California prison for women, and they don't mix male and female prisoners. They don't mix them in classrooms either. They don't allow them to dress like they are on the beach either. She also has long, sharp fingernails. Not allowed. 2 rings and a bracelet. Not allowed. We are told by the narrator that she is at an Antioch college on prison grounds. While I found no information on Antioch College at any California prisons, if Van Houten were on prison grounds, there would be no men in the classroom. That is why they call it the California Institution for Women. And at no time, in school or out of it, are prisoners allowed to wear shorts, short skirts, halter tops, bandanas, or dresses. The same analysis should be applied to Tex Watson. Like Atkins, Watson is supposed to be one of the most vicious of the family. But like Atkins, he too has CIA written all over him. He isn't in jail anywhere, except for a few days every 5 years when they call him in for his part. He was a high school honey boy A student, straight as an arrow, short hair, and good looks. Besides being honor roll, he was the newspaper editor and a track star, and a Methodist church group leader to boot. He then went to University of North Texas, where he was a business major and fraternity man. He was there for 3 years and did well. The CIA often recruits college juniors. He did not have long hair in college, did not show any leftist tendencies. Texas fraternities were not known for admitting hippies in 1966, and he was not known to be conflicted. Mainstream sources also admit he worked as a baggage handler for Braniff, which afforded him travel opportunities. Travel opportunities to Langley, Virginia, perhaps. We are told in the mainstream that Watson used his travel miles to take girls to Dallas. Whoops! He was already in or near Dallas. I don't think you need to burn travel miles to get from Denton to Dallas. Maybe he was taking them to Merida. Also, the CIA often places young recruits as baggage handlers, since this is a great way to learn smuggling techniques while being useful in a low-risk job. We are told in the mainstream story that Watson had some combat training, and he is said to have trained the Manson girls, as well as having taken on all the difficult killings of the men. Where would he have gotten that training? Did he get it in his Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity? Watson didn't need any combat training, since he was only used as an actor, but if he had had any combat training, I think we know where he got it. When Watson took his first assignment and was sent to Los Angeles, he was installed in a wig shop. No one ever analyzes that. Who would be capable of getting Watson a job working with wigs? Sebring, of course. Sebring was either Watson's handler or enabler, and Adkins too. It wasn't drugs or porn that linked him, it was military intelligence. At the same time Watson was installed in the wig shop, he was also installed in Laurel Canyon. The problem there is twofold. One, Laurel Canyon, then as now, was a high-rent neighborhood. That's why all the famous people were living there, of course. The Beach Boys and the Mamas and the Papas and Doris Day and Sebring and Polanski weren't going to be living in the slums of East LA. So how does a new wig man, a poor hick with a drawl straight out of the Dallas suburbs, get set up immediately in Laurel Canyon? 2. Laurel Canyon was the center of operations of Lookout Mountain Film Studios. Many of the people working there were installed in the immediate neighborhood for convenience, so many of those houses were CIA houses. Do you think it was just another coincidence that Watson was installed there? Do you really think he met the various other operatives while hitchhiking, as we are told? No, he met them by appointment. Perhaps the most ridiculous story is that Watson picked up Dennis Wilson while Wilson was hitchhiking. We may have thought it was the other way around. No, the story always told was that Wilson, a millionaire beach boy, was hitchhiking. Not that his car had broken down or anything like that, but that he was hitchhiking. How many multimillionaires who own Ferraris and Jaguars do you know that go out hitchhiking for fun? Do you think Jay Leno goes out hitchhiking in the hills of LA now? How about Eddie Murphy? Justin Timberlake? How little respect must they have had for their audience to tell a story like that, expecting anyone to believe it? When Watson was first arrested, 2 high-profile attorneys leapt to his aid, much as Shilby had leapt to Manson's aid in 1966. David DeLuche and Perry Walshin took his case pro bono, although DeLuche was known at the time as a GOP bigwig. Why was a bigwig GOP attorney so interested in the hippie Watson? Even stranger, DeLuche said that he had already had 40 consultations with Watson before his arrest. What? Perhaps the most obvious clue to the fake status of Tex Watson is his fathering of 4 children in prison during conjugal visits. Conjugal visits weren't allowed for prisoners like Watson or Adkins, even in the few states that allowed such visits for lesser prisoners. We are told these visits for lifers were banned in 1996 in California, but that is a cover story. Some rules changed in 1996, but violent murderers/torturers like Watson were never allowed conjugal visits. Watson wasn't just a lifer, he was a multiple premeditated murderer with torture, which is why he initially got the death penalty. Over 10% of inmates in California state prisons are lifers, and many of them are 3-strikers who did nothing worse than flash a knife during a robbery. The change in 1996 applied to them, not to Watson. There are currently hundreds of people on death row in California, and the only reason Watson isn't there with them is that he lucked out and fell into the gap between 1972 and 1978, when those on death row were transferred to life due to a Supreme Court decision on the death penalty. But as a matter of rules, the same rules apply to Watson that apply to those on death row, since his crime is the same. The rules are based on the severity of your crime, not on your term. If you are on death row, you get no conjugal visits. If you are a murderer/torturer, you get no conjugal visits for obvious reasons. If you enjoy murdering for sport, as Watson is said to have done, then you aren't going to be set up with a new victim by the prison system. The wife's family would sue for millions, and the prisons know that. Ask yourself this: if top-level inmates like Watson were allowed conjugal visits before 1996, why didn't Manson get himself a wife back in the early 70s? According to the mainstream story promoted by Helter Skelter and most other places, Charlie is and was hypersexual. He is supposed to have slept with hundreds or thousands of young girls. He is also supposed to be a magnet for impressionable young women to this day, and yet we never hear about wives or conjugal visits for Manson. Why do we hear about them with Watson? Simply because with Watson there are known children they have to account for in some way. So they tell you these children came from conjugal visits, even though that is impossible. All the high-profile parole hearings would be easy to fake as well. As we have seen, Pam Turner and Deborah Tate and Doris Tate and Patty/Sharon Tate and Anthony DeMaria and the rest of the speakers are already insiders. Some have been acting these roles since 1968, either under threat from the CIA or just because it is a thrill. The entire story about Deborah Tate being offended by the conjugal visits of Tex Watson is just more theater. The screenwriters finally realized they had a hole they needed to fill, so they created this new saga in order to tell you that the hole had been filled. No more conjugal visits for Tex Watson, so I guess if Tex has any more kids, he better learn to hide them better. He can now claim there are grandkids. Nor is it just the Manson people that have been sold to you as fake prisoners. As just one example outside the family, we can look at Christopher Gibson, Barry Mills, and Tyler Bingham, supposedly leaders of the Aryan Brotherhood. 3 prison photos, all of them in disallowed props. You don't get to wear your hair or beard like that, and they don't take photos with sunglasses on. Here's a question for you. Is that 3 different guys or 1 guy at different ages? Why do all 3 have the same shaped head, bulbous-ended nose, and very similar ears? The second and third guys are obviously the same. They have just manipulated the ears a little bit. With the second guy, they have reversed the right ear and pasted it over the left ear. With the third guy, they have done the opposite, reversed the left ear and pasted it over the right. The first guy is again the same person, but without glasses and squinting. Even the glasses are the same. They just painted in the lenses in one photo. Look where the bright spots are on the frames, by the nose and the left cheek. There he is a 4th time, this time as Stephen Hicklin. They put him in muted light, but it is the same pointy head, same eyebrows, and same square chin. For some reason, they like to manipulate the ears as if that changes everything. Actually, the Aryan Brotherhood are not completely separate from the Manson family, since they are initially linked back in the 1970s. That's why Manson wore the swastika, among other reasons, we are told. But it no longer matters, since we can see that both Manson and the Aryan Brotherhood are just creations of military intelligence or some other agency of the state. They are both parts of a bigger story being told to create fear, manufacture conflict, and control the wider population. After all this, we can see that the Tate event is just the longest-running feature film of Lookout Mountain Propaganda Film Studios, sort of like Michael Apted's 7-Up series, but with the Manson family instead of British children. Like Operation Gladio, it was directed and funded by military intelligence, with Paul Tate as captain and Jay Sebring as lieutenant. Tate was able to use what he had learned in Italy, importing it to the streets of Los Angeles, including his uncanny ability to pass for a bearded leftist. He then used his own daughter as cover, relying on the fact that no one would think he had agreed to her death, as well as on the fact that no one would figure out it was all faked. It worked for 43 years, and would have continued to work if they hadn't left the original crime scene photos in plain sight. For 43 years, these photos had acted as their own defense and their own spin. No one wanted to study them closely, and those that did were death groupies who wanted them to be real. The evidence could therefore be hidden in plain sight. However, as you have just seen, the maze of contradictory and planted evidence can be successfully navigated, provided you have the ability to pull together the important facts and the intelligence to collate them properly. The most important talent in this navigation is seeing red flags when you read them. I have done almost no original research here. I have only highlighted and circled things that others have seen and passed by. I then linked these red flags into a story. That was not so difficult. Once the red flags are found, the story almost tells itself. The 4 tallest red flags pretty much prove the story alone, with little help from me. Once we see that Sharon is alive in that photo, that Paul Tate is a military intelligence colonel in hippie disguise, that Lookout Mountain Film Lab is in the background of the Celio Drive photos, and that Sharon has since been posing as her sister, all the rest falls into place. And once we see the method in this false flag, we can export what we know to other cases. That is what I will do in upcoming cases. Some of them even more striking and controversial than this one. And that is the end of Miles Mathis's paper on the Tate murders. So, I gotta say, after I read a few of his papers, I would say I'd be blown away by all of this, but now I'm just kind of getting more into it. I'm seeing the patterns. Miles is just sensational when he points out these details that you would think would be so obvious for most people, but I just have to say, it's just... I really don't get into calling people stupid or foolish or whatever when these things happen, and I just look at it as, look, most people are living their lives and not paying attention to this stuff because they just don't know to do that. They just, like, why would this happen is what they would say. The most common reaction, if you were to run up to people and talk about this kind of stuff or bring up Miles's paper and say all of this, their most common reaction is going to be like, what are you talking about? That's crazy, and why would this ever happen? But you don't really see the reason why unless you dive into it. It's really hard to get people to really believe that this stuff is true without just having to sit down for a minute and just say, hey, look, you got to look at the details. Here's what's really going on. Here's how it's going on. And here's why. It's all about manipulation, things like this. So it's just, in my opinion, this is some of the most important information to get out to the public because people need to understand that they're being manipulated, even if they don't believe that somebody is out there to manipulate them. It doesn't matter if you're a farmer in the middle of nowhere or if you're living in a busy city. They are out to lie to you. When I say they, I'm talking about Hollywood. I'm talking about the intelligence agencies. Who are we really talking about when we talk about they, them? They're out to get you. They're out to lie to you. It's them. Who are we talking about? Well, we could be talking about the government, we could be talking about the intelligence agencies, we could be talking about the secret societies, we could be talking about the Illuminati, whatever. They're all the same thing, really, if you look into it. If you follow, where this all comes from, it's really coming from the intelligence agencies. And if you study the history of the intelligence agencies, let's just stick with the CIA since it's the most common and most recognized. If you actually study the CIA and who founded it and what it's all about, you will find that this stuff, this entire paper that Miles put together, is very, very common occurrence. I highly suggest that people read a book called I did a big series on it. It's William Blum's book, Killing Hope, U.S. military and CIA interventions since World War II. I promise you, if you read that book, all of this will make so much more sense. Because that book gives you the full scope of what the CIA truly does when it's operating. And in that book, it goes over what the CIA does throughout the world, but it doesn't cover what it did in the United States. So when we look for this stuff, just look at what goes on in other countries. So let me give you kind of an example here. So pulling from Killing Hope, he talks about many instances in, let me go with the Congo, with President, Lumumba, I believe is his name. Yeah, Prime Minister Lumumba. This guy was coming up in the Congo, and he was a politician. He became the leader of the country, and he was not bowing down to what the CIA and the United States government wanted his country to do. I'm talking about trade agreements, I'm talking about business agreements, I'm talking about Wall Street coming in and wanting to do business deals in a sense of, maintaining control over the country's resources and things like this. This is what Wall Street does. They go into third world countries and they use the CIA to get their business dealings done. Anyway, Lumumba wasn't having it. He was a nationalist. He wanted the people of his country to reap the rewards of the resources that they have there, and I totally agree. I am a nationalist. I see that here's my definition of a nationalist, because Google is literally changing the definition of a nationalist to be a crazy right-winger who just wants to be like part of the Aryan Brotherhood or whatever. They always link it to the Nazis. But a nationalist is just somebody who wants the best interest of their country furthered. So if you're a president or if you're leading the country, you're a nationalist, you want the needs of your country to be over the needs of anyone else. And that's perfectly fine, in my opinion, if it's done correctly. So Lumumba, he wasn't assassinated directly by the CIA, but here's what they did. They put in disinformation programs. They made everybody think that he was not crazy, but they wanted to discredit him. They wanted to make him look terrible. And then they pulled strings around him. They bribed military officials. They bribed government officials to kick him out of power. And while he was trying to regain power, they handed him over to one of his enemies, and then that guy killed him. So did the CIA literally put a gun to his head and kill him? They tried to. They tried to assassinate him through poisoning. They tried to do a bunch of different things to get him out of the way. But in the end, they were able to give him to somebody else who just murdered him, and it was all done with the CIA. There are many other examples throughout the world where let's go more into the propaganda. So let's cover South America. So in South America, the United States, or let me just put this with the CIA, because this is very important. The people of the United States have no idea what's being done in their name and with their money. This is very important. People need to understand the crimes against humanity that is being carried out in their name without their knowledge. Okay? So in South America, the CIA literally built schools to train police forces. They opened up colleges to train, to literally brainwash people into their own world of propaganda. They painted the leaders they wanted to paint in a good light, and any leaders that were nationalists that didn't want to deal with Wall Street were painted as crazy communists. And so they would do this by, they planted stories in the media. They created newspapers. They created entire industries to brainwash people. They even created labor unions that were brainwashed to believe that they were a part of an organization that was doing, what they should be doing, and not that what they were actually doing, which was being slaves to the CIA. This stuff is massive. So anybody who really doesn't believe that they can have fake prisoners, that they can have false flag events that are so huge that you're seeing it on television and in popular culture for decades, then they should look more closely into the facts. This stuff happens all the time. The more people who start knowing about it and waking up to this, then we can start finally having some freedom from this. We have the internet now. We can spread information like wildfire. That's why some people who get out there, like Miles Mathis, are so dangerous, because they're putting out information that anybody can look at and confirm by just looking at the picture and saying, you know what? That picture sure does look fishy. You know what? The things that Miles Mathis points out are not hidden behind a classified file that only he reads. Okay? The information that he puts out in his articles are freely available to anyone who cares to look them up. And I really encourage people to start doing their own research and coming to their own opinions about this stuff. So it's very important for us to just wake up. We're living in the world of Trump now. Trump has won the election. What's going on? All the media companies, all of Hollywood are slandering him and telling us that he's an evil guy and that he needs to go. Why are they doing this? All the intelligence agencies are saying the same thing. He works for Russia. He's a Russian agent. Anybody who knows anything about the facts concerning any of this knows that that's complete nonsense. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is not a part of the team or anything. I'm actually a fan of Donald Trump for most of what he's doing. He seems to be crushing the mainstream media. That's a fantastic thing. He's showing them that they're fake. That's why he keeps talking about fake news. He's trying to destroy the illusion that these people put out any real information. I love that about Donald Trump. I love the fact that he's very brash. He talks straightforward. It's not always it's not always very flattering, but I would rather hear the straight truth that he's just going to say, what needs to be said, than to just be a politician and just talk about fancy sounding words and whatever. But anyway, in my opinion at this point, I do believe that Donald Trump is against the establishment, although I don't know for sure, because anything is possible with these people. But I truly believe we are living in extraordinary times. I think that people are finally waking up to the fact that they are being lied to. They just don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. So by uncovering more and more of this information and just getting it out to the public, it's going to help a lot with people just waking up to the fact that they have been lied to and they've been manipulated. And the truth is so much stranger than fiction. I'll go ahead and end it there. I'm not sure what I'm going to cover next. It might be it might be Ted Bundy. I might go into the Lincoln assassination. This Miles, he's got so many papers on everything. He's got scientific papers that talk about how ludicrous some of the scientific theories have been, and this guy's incredible. I will definitely be spending a lot of time on Miles Mathis because I want to learn what this guy's putting out. The information he's putting out is phenomenal, and I encourage people to go to his website and read his work. He's got I think he's got hundreds of papers. It must be over 100. I've scrolled through a lot of them, and the guy's got amazing work. Please check out Miles Mathis. He has a donation tab on his website called Feed the Kitty. Check it out. Throw the guy some tips for the amazing work that he's doing. So that's where I'll end it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.